It's really incredible what we're seeing because the traditional market is literally exploding. Stocks are skyrocketing. After the pressure on metals, we saw gold, then silver, which is still going up, by the way. And as for crypto, absolutely nothing is happening. We're even seeing a continuation of the correction and maybe potentially a bottom forming in the coming days. By the way, I talked to you about this on Instagram, what my prediction is in terms of the bottom. And above all, hit the little notification bell so you get notified in real time when the video comes out. Usually that's about 10 minutes after I finish recording. I don't do any editing, it's pure live, just as if it were a real live stream. But Bitcoin is dropping below $67,000. It's the fourth consecutive month in the red. We'll see it. So it's a streak we haven't seen since, remember, 2018. That's when I got into crypto. Back then, Bitcoin wasn't at 66,000. It was early 2018 in January, and it was around $19,000. In any case, it was below the ground, below 20,000. But the divergence between traditional markets and crypto is getting bigger. Is that a good sign? Does it mean that the rotation of liquidity into our ecosystem is over? Or are we witnessing the final phase of the purge before synchronization? We're going to review all that right now. But while the crypto market, as I was saying, is sinking into panic, all you have to do is look up at the traditional markets to see blue skies and finally some green. And this contrast is almost unreal because we're probably experiencing the biggest divergence of this cycle. Crypto is undergoing a violent correction. And American stocks, meanwhile, are calmly in the process of, or have just printed, a massive reversal. And that actually reminds me of a stat I mentioned to you a few months ago, saying that every time we were within 2% of the all-time high and there was a rate cut, the traditional market would go up 6 to 12 months. I don't know if you remember that chart, which was pretty relevant, but for now, actually, Bitcoin isn't following that trend. So what's happening with the Dow Jones? It's hitting 50,400. That was the record, the 50,000 points, which was an important milestone. And by the way, Trump said we were going to reach 100,000. So that's an increase here of more than 35% since the dips in April 2025. So when we had the tariffs, remember, great memory. We also have the S&P 500, which has added more than 19,000 billion, dollars. The Nasdaq has surged and climbed by 52%, and even the Russell 2000 is soaring. And that's important because the risk here isn't global risk fleeing, it's crypto that's being abandoned, at least for now. And if we take a closer look at Bitcoin, it's falling back below 66,000, just slightly above 66,000. We can see that the selling pressure hasn't disappeared. On the contrary, we're now heading into a fourth consecutive month in the red. So look at it the other way. Flip the thumbnail, flip the chart, and you'll see that we might actually be in an opportunity phase. It's not when things are green that you should buy, but especially when they're in the red. But this is a scenario we haven't seen since 2018. That's exactly what we were describing. That is to say, we have a traditional market that's catching its breath, but crypto is continuing its purge cycle, and it's a complete decoupling. And this decoupling, in fact, doesn't stop at the price, because behind the survey, from Gallup here shows that half of Americans expect stocks to rise in the next 6 months. So they're rather bullish on stocks. The chart is right here. And meanwhile, the fear and greed index is at 9, just sitting there. We're literally at the absolute bottom, the very bottom of sentiment. Yet you're still loyal, and thank you for that. Still just as many of you watching the daily updates. It makes me happy, it gives me strength, and I try to give you that energy. And the strength I get in return, all that you give me in the comments, that really means a lot. And I was telling you about decoupling. If this decoupling is so intense today, it's not because, or at least maybe, and this is my theory, it's precisely because synchronization hasn't started yet. And before I talk to you about today's surprise, I wanted to say a quick word about the sponsor of this daily update, which is NordVPN. Today, in the age of all things digital, we don't take the time to think about our digital hygiene, which is super important. It's really important to protect our data, especially sensitive data when we're in finance or investing, whether it's our location, our IP address, or simply browsing privately. And today there are solutions that aren't expensive. And with the code Roman, I'll put it in the description for you. And on NordVPN, you can get 4 months free here, and there are really unbeatable deals. You can even pay with crypto, and you can get your money back if you're not satisfied within 30 days. And there are even gift cards. I saw $20 here and $40 there. And if you stay subscribed for 31 days, you can actually take advantage of this gift card. So you almost get your first month or even your first month's reimbursed. And if you don't have a VPN, you know what you need to do. I'll put the link in the comments for you, pinned and also in the description. And thanks to NordVPN for sponsoring this part of the video. But let's get back to the heart of the matter. Because while the market, at least the retail market, is panicking, we have Goldman Sachs, who calmly and officially declares $2.36 billion in crypto exposure. And that's not a small amount. It's true they've flown a bit under the radar, but they have $1.1 billion in Bitcoin, $1 billion in Ethereum, then some XRP and some Solana. So, where exactly are institutions buying and what are they buying? And yet, that only represents 0.33% of their total allocation. And now we're going to talk about banks in just a moment with a law that's still a bit up in the air. So in other words, when I see this, even in a panicking market, the world's major institutions remain exposed. They don't run away, and in fact, they're even buying more. And I was telling you about it yesterday, actually, those famous White House discussions about stablecoins. They haven't reached an agreement, at least not for now, because what are the banks asking for? They're basically asking for yields on stablecoins to be almost completely banned. So basically, they're going after the platforms, crypto ones with Coinbase front and center. And on the other side, you have the crypto players who refuse to give in, which is normal, if you ask me. And as a result, we're at a total standstill, kind of like a shutdown. People just can't agree. And a compromise needs to be found before March 1st, so in about 20 days. Otherwise, the Clarity Act and the Market Structure Bill could remain. But be careful, when you're often in a political standoff like this, as we saw with Greenland, it usually means you're close to a deal or at least a possible agreement. It's tense, sure, but things are moving forward. So what's happening on the geopolitical tensions front? Trump is adding fuel to the fire, throwing in another piece. And who has stated that he is considering deploying a second aircraft carrier group against Iran if negotiations fail? And this is in fact a continuation of the military buildup that the United States has already begun. And as you know, when the prospect of military conflict enters the equation, risk tolerance immediately drops. But even if it doesn't trigger anything, it's still enough to affect the mood and in a positive way. So, to be continued, I'll talk to you about it in the daily update. And on the blockchain, let's surf a bit on the blockchain because we've got a pretty clear signal. Realized losses are still largely dominating. We're talking about a profit to loss ratio of 0.25 at the moment. So, in other words, for every dollar taken as profit, there are $4 being sold at a loss. This is typically the kind of reading we see, I'll repeat the word, either just before a bear market or in the middle of a capitulation phase. But there's a small encouraging sign at least. Profits have recently edged slightly above losses. That doesn't mean the market is reversing, but it shows that the purge may be nearing its point of exhaustion. And another indicator, after 4 consecutive months in the red, the fear and greed index is literally crushed. Historically, we're much closer to a bottom than to the start of a bullish cycle. Hence my inverted thumbnail, hence looking at the chart from the other direction. And this kind of extreme fear appears in very specific contexts. When there is total capitulation, and that's very clearly where we are right now. So in the moment, everyone panics, everyone sells, no one sees a way out. And a few months later, what happens? It's exactly this zone that investors regret not having bought too late. I'm not going to go into this further in my private club. What happened during COVID? What happened during the subprime crisis? $3,000 Bitcoin, $15,000 Bitcoin. When we had the FTX crash, it was $15,000. During COVID, it was $3,000. In short, and during the subprime crisis, Bitcoin was just born. So in fact, there wasn't yet any real valuation of Bitcoin. It was after the subprime crisis that Bitcoin was created because it provided a solution to a problem, a banking problem, a centralization problem. But the markets do not reward, at least right now, those who seek comfort. You shouldn't seek comfort. You have to seek discomfort in order to have comfort later. Because it's those people who will be rewarded and who will be able to endure this zone of discomfort thanks to their vision. By the way, that's the word of the day. It's the word of the day for Challenge 126 that I launched yesterday. And I would add that it's important to have this vision and not let go of it. So everything seems correlated, but you have to keep a cool head. Cycles always end up reconnecting with this decorrelation, this decoupling, sooner or later. Anyway, this was Julian. See you tomorrow on Instagram. We're close to 100,099.9. Join in a little to celebrate this milestone on Instagram. And then see you tomorrow for a new video. I'll also leave you with this video that shows you a bit where I think the bottom is and will be. In any case, a level, a time zone, and a price zone. Go check it out now, and I'll see you tomorrow for a new video. This was Julian. Bye-bye.